Welcome back to episode 7 of the Pod of Many Things, the chill roundtable tabletop RPG podcast where we talk about everything Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder, and the rest. It's me, your friendly favourite Furbolg wizard, Adderson, and as usual, I'm joined by Leon, our half-orc bard and artificer. How you doing, Leon?
Well, thank you, Adderson. Good to be speaking to you again. It's been a while.
It's been a while. Yeah, we've, as you might have noticed, we've been absent for a week because of something quite exciting. Leon, why don't you let the people all know why we've taken a break, what's been going on, and make our big announcement?
So, reason we took a break is because we've been migrating the podcast from Podbean, which has been kind of meh. We've been migrating it over to Anchor, which has been pretty fantastic, if I do say so myself. And migrating over to Anchor comes with some fantastic benefits. So, without further ado, I can announce that we are finally, and I know a lot of people have been asking for this, we are finally on Spotify. Yes, there will be a link in the description if you're watching this on YouTube. There will be posts on our Twitter and Facebook, but we are finally on motherfucking Spotify. But that is not all. We are also on Breaker. We are also on Pocket Casts. We are also on Radio Public. And we are just awaiting confirmation, we are awaiting, what's the word I'm looking for here, Addison? Approval, yes, we are awaiting approval for iTunes, baby. So Apple Podcasts. Yeah, I keep calling it iTunes because I'm 30. I'm 30, and that's what I grew up with. But Apple Podcasts, we will be on that soon, as well as a few other podcast platforms. So yeah, excellent news. So if you are watching this on YouTube, and if you don't have YouTube Premium, you finally can take us on the road, listen in your car, put us on in your Bluetooth radio in the background, and just chill with us, which is the whole point of this. D&D and chill, D&D and chill.
Yeah, no, it is really exciting, and I agree that Podbean as a platform was a bit like unintuitive. Like, it seemed like there was a lot of extra steps that didn't need to be there. And then we, as you've said, we've moved it onto Anchor, and suddenly we're on all these different platforms. So yeah, that's pretty sick. So let's get on to today's actual topic for our podcast. So today we are talking about the second half, one of the 3 pillars of the D&D world. We are talking combat encounters, hordes of goblins, squads of guards, and all the things in between. So we're going to talk about fighting, combat, and how you can make a good combat if you're a DM, and what tools you can have. So let's talk about what a combat encounter is. Let's give it a definition, and then we can just move on to all the cool stuff where we talk about cool things we've done, cool things we like doing. So Leon, what would you describe a combat encounter as?
This is the easy one to define. A combat encounter is when shit gets real, okay? The weapons come out, the spells start getting thrown about, somebody's going to take a fireball to the face, initiative has been rolled, and people may or may not die.
Yeah, it's shit has hit the fan if we've got this far, and it's as soon as the DM or GM says roll for initiative, and you start fighting somebody. So that's what a combat encounter is. But what makes an actual good combat encounter then, Leon? Because you could say, well, throwing loads of goblins at somebody, or making it so there's lots of enemies or whatever. But what actually makes a good combat? How do we as DMs make combat enjoyable for our players, but also, I don't know, deadly? What do you think?
Question, and it's something that's very hard to get right. We spoke in the last episode with Jack at great length about doing those fantastic social encounters, and even though there's less mechanics to the social encounters, I think they are somewhat on a similar par with getting them right. The thing is with combat is it can vary, especially in the way that it works with D&D. Turn-based, you're waiting for your turn. You're sitting there for a while, depending on how many players are on the table, how many mobs are on the board. It can get very boring very, very quickly. And I think the more I've played D&D, the more I've realized that, combat encounters, that you don't just want to throw in a goblin and have your party fight a goblin or a pack of goblins. You really want to put some thought into that and try and make each encounter as much of a white knuckle ride as possible, rather than just going through the motions, rolling initiative, rolling to hit, rolling the damage, yada 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 yada.
No, that makes sense. Like it can either combat is a bit of a grenade in a session. It either goes off, like you throw it in and it goes off, or it's an absolute dud because either your combat's too easy, so your party steamrolls over it, or it's too hard, and
it's such a hard thing to get right, that balance as well. Not too deadly, not too easy that it's boring. Such a difficult balance, and it's something I've been DMing for 3 years now, maybe 4 years now, and it's such a hard thing to master. But I think between us we have plenty of experience that we can give some good tips and advice for for the people listening out there.
Yeah, when I spoke about, so some people, much like yourself, who said that there's a commonality between social encounters and combat encounters. Some people plan them similarly. I don't know if you do that, but some people plan them in a very similar manner. And
I know for a fact that Jack does, who was on the previous episode. I know he plans them very similarly. It's a moment in the game. It's one of those pivotal moments where something is, it's going to change the course of the campaign. Jack was really good at that with social encounters. But yeah, I think you need to do a similar thing like that with your combat encounters.
When I think about it, so one of the things that I made very clear about in social encounters with Jack was stakes. That a social encounter has to have stakes, and a result that's either good or bad. And actually, a lot of people would say the same thing about combat. And this is one of the times where I'm going to go, actually, I don't think that's necessary, because because the thing is, if you fail a combat, you don't get to see what the stakes were. Like, it's over. You die. Like, that's the full stop to
your life, basically.
Yeah, the stakes of your life. So in my key word for it is more like threat. So instead of stakes, it's more like threat. So like I like to have it so that there's a definitive threat, and I don't like pulling punches, but I don't like. So I like build up. My fights will get incrementally harder as you go through a session, if there's multiple combats, or if I've planned multiple combats over a time, because of the fact that what I basically want them to do is I want them to feel like that drain, and that and come towards that block. Because if I am throwing trash mobs at you, the thing is I'm probably getting you to burn stuff up. Like, if I throw an encounter at you that's just full of trash mobs and that you could wipe out easily, I want you to burn stuff. I want you to go into something and amp up the threat, because of the fact that you thought, oh, okay, well, we're steamrolling over these guys. We're going to walk into this room and deal with these people. So I think that's a really good thing for a combat encounter, is that threat. And if they survive, then they get to see what the stakes were. Did they save the village? Did they find the treasure? But if they don't survive, then they never know. Like, they never know what the end result is. They never know what the unless they decide to come back to that world in that campaign. You know what I'm saying? It's something that I've been grappling with. How do you so for those people who don't know, and I've always wanted to ask this, Leon, challenge rating. So in Dungeons and Dragons, every monster has a challenge rating from an 8th to way over 20, and basically this is the higher the number, the more deadly that creature is. So
if a creature has a challenge rating of 4, then it would take four 4th level characters to defeat that monster.
Theoretically.
And I stress the theoretically, because this is not an exact science. This is much more of a pseudoscience.
Yeah, because how I usually do it is I have a thing where I can't remember where I read this. I read it somewhere. I don't know if I read it in the Dungeon Master's Guide. But I always make the CR of a challenge equal the total party level, and if I want it to be more dangerous, I put it up. And so how do you?
The problem with that is though. Sorry. Finish your question.
Well, my question was about to be, how do you use challenge levels? So do you use challenge ratings? Because you're about to say the problem is with challenge ratings. So
yeah. So I do use challenge ratings as a guideline. The thing is with challenge ratings, and the thing is why I say they're a guideline and they're not an exact science, is because the thing that completely throws it out of the water is action economy. Action economy completely wrecks challenge rating. For example, you could have 4 level 1 players up against a challenge rating 3, I don't know, lion or something. And if the players roll really well on their initiative, there is every chance they could kill that challenge rating 3 monster before it even gets a chance to do anything.
Yeah.
So you have to balance it. I think, there's a couple things that you can do. I think one of the things is if it's a boss battle in particular, I think one of the things that you can do is, you have your level 3 party, you have your level 3 main boss, and then you have maybe 1, 2, 3 mobs alongside that boss. So let's say you have a hobgoblin, for example. You have 3 other little regular goblins as his underlings, just to make it a little bit more difficult. And that may not work for an inexperienced party, but for an experienced party, they should be able to handle something like that. And I think another thing that you can do, if you really if you like hunting one specific monster that's been terrorizing a village or something, you really should play up the threat of that monster. A good example of that is a displacer beast. A displacer beast is it's a natural hunter. So you're going to go into the forest to find this thing, but maybe the displacer beast is actually stalking you. Maybe it's going to use some hit and run tactics to try and weaken you down before you get to its lair, or something like that. I think if you just go, take an arena, for example. If you just go in there into the arena, there's a challenge rating 3 monster. The 4 of you are also level 3. If you just take it that way, the encounter's going to be incredibly boring, because you're going to kill it in 2-3 rounds, and it's only going to get 1 attack off on maybe 1 or 2 of your creatures, and it's going to be incredibly boring and incredibly dull combat.
Yeah. So again, if we look at your answer in terms of like how you use challenge ratings, you use them to increase the threat level of your encounter, to make it interesting and to make it like gripping. Because I like that what you said about Jax, in the fact that these combats are a moment, like they're a moment in the game. So
I'll tell you another story, actually, because this is what I did last night. So last night I had 4. I was playing Theros. If you've been listening to the past few episodes, everybody will know I love Theros. I finally started that campaign. But anyway, yes, I had 4 level 2 characters. So I created an encounter where the players went up against 4 0.5 challenge rating snake creatures.
Yeah.
So the challenge rating is still 2, but you're negating that action economy. Because there's 4 of them. There's 4 of them, but the challenge rating is still the same. And let me tell you, that was still a tough battle. It was still a tough fight. All of the creatures rolled significantly higher than the rest of the party on initiative. They got a few shots off. They downed 1 player. Almost down the other 3, and it was one of those white knuckle rides, because you didn't know who was going to win. Yeah, so that, breaking the challenge rating down to negate the action economy, playing up the monster's tactics, And what was the other thing that I said? Having a couple mobs there, those are some things that you should really look at doing when you're planning out your encounter.
That's a good idea actually. Like, because I think sometimes you look at a challenge rating of a monster, for example, and you go, well, I can just put that against them, and because it's like, so. I'm going to go more into this story later because you want me to tell this story because I managed to get divine intervention to work. But so part of that encounter was a Death Knight, which is like a CR17 monster. And a lot of people and a lot of inexperienced DMs would go, well, that'll be enough, right? And it did. And to be honest with you, if I'd have played it a bit better as a GM, it probably could have been, because of the fact that every time it took its 3 attacks, it downed the fighter, who is their main tank in my party. It immediately one swing of its sword, and most people were done for. And I made some modifications to the monster, because I think that's a thing to make things exciting as well. You shouldn't be afraid to modify monsters. Not just because it's more fun, but because also as well it catches people by surprise who know the monster manual very well. Like, there's always that one person,
especially if you're playing with experienced players. Yeah. Or there's always that one person as well.
Yeah. So like everybody was like, oh, it's a Death Knight, and then I had this thing where it could transform its weapon.
Awesome.
So it started off with a longsword, which is its basic weapon and then it saw the fighter with his 2-handed greatsword. It went, that's cool. I like that as well, and transformed its sword into a greatsword. So it does now.
So it's a Hexblade Death Knight.
Yeah, pretty much. Like it could swap its weapons around, and if it had become a ranged battle, I would have swapped to arrows, and then still kept like the necrotic damage and stuff like that as part of its attacks. So I think that you've got to play up that threat and add surprises that make that threat viable. And your thing of breaking it down is also a good idea, because of the fact that, again, what you've said is really good, that action economy point. Like, can you do us a favor and explain what you mean by action economy to people who might be a bit like, what's action economy? Like,
that's a good point. All right, so action economy, it's basically turns. So you have a party of 4 versus 1 monster. Well, you roll initiative, and the turns are going to go in order. However, in that one round, that means that because there's only one enemy, it means within that one round there are going to be 4 attacks versus that one monster. And depending on the monster, there's only going to be one attack against the party itself. And again, depending on the monster, it can only attack one person. So you're doing exponentially more damage to the monster than that monster is able to do to you, despite the fact that the challenge rating says that this should be a difficult combat.
Yeah, exactly. So you it's kind of like action amount and action spread. So it's almost like the amount of actions you can take and the amount of targets that you can spread them across.
Yeah, like if there's a party of 4 versus 4 enemies, then there's a likelihood that somebody is going to get that everybody's going to get hit at least once during that round. So it's far more balanced. But if it's just 4 on 1, you get 4 attacks on it. It's only going to get 1 on you. So the balance is in your favor despite the action economy. Now, I actually have a crazy story about this. When I was running Waterdeep Dragon Heist, one of the very first encounters as level 1 players, they put you up against a Mind Flayer, a goddamn Illithid.
Okay.
And my level 1 players almost killed this Illithid. Now, there are reasons for that. The Illithid was trying to escape. I don't know why, but that's just how it's written in the book. The Illithid will do everything to try and escape, and it needs to use its action to do that. But before this Illithid could use its action, it had to take 4 attacks from the party, and the party almost killed it. I believe there were 2 crits in there or something, and they really whittled it down. So, it probably definitely would have killed outright one of the players, but then after that, it's still would have had to have taken 3 attacks from the rest of the party, which, if they all hit, it would have killed it. Yeah. And an Illithid, I want to guess, is like challenge 8 or something like that, maybe a little bit higher.
I think, is it 10? It might be. I know that it's
double digits.
I think a Mind Flayer always gets me on its challenge rating because of the fact that it should be a lot higher, but it's not. So we'll have to check.
Pull it up.
Pull it up for us. Have a look.
Yeah, so a Mind Flayer is challenge rating 7, which I think is way too low for what it is, but this Mind Flayer was almost killed by a party of 4 level 1s. And, that is why you should never, ever use challenge rating as a science. It is a guide at very most.
Yeah, so let's boil it down then. So we've talked about it a lot, and we've explained some complicated, because the thing is with this episode of the podcast, is it's going to be a lot of theory crafting. It's going to be a lot of mechanics and talking about, okay, how does this work as a mechanic rather than an opinion. And obviously we're going to throw our opinions in there. So we've said surprises, we've said threat, we've said action economy. What else, therefore, makes a good combat encounter?
I think another thing is the terrain itself. Giving your players things to use to their advantage. Especially if you have like a rogue or something in the party that they can hide behind, or if you have like a ranged wizard, they can hide behind like a church pew or something. If you're in a church, and they can use that to get a little AC bonus and start throwing their fire bolts. But then, just to make the combat more, just to up the stakes. If you're putting in terrain for your players, then there's no reason the enemies can't use that terrain as well and use that to their advantage.
And that's something I wanted to come on to in this next section, actually, about like anything the players can do, the monsters can do, and sometimes maybe even better. And what I want to talk about is a combat toolbox. So as a DM, we have like toolboxes, don't we, of things that we reach for when we're making stuff. So when we're making a social encounter, we'll have like a standard format or thing that we go to. So what tools do we have as DMs to make fun and engaging combats that are threatening, that spread out the action economy, that use the setting to your advantage? What tools do you have, Leon, as a DM, when you're making combat encounters?
Yeah, I think I'll... Excuse me. I think I'll start from the biggest one and work down. But the thing that I like to use the most is, and this is a Matt Colville thing, action-oriented monsters, which I think is a fantastic concept. So action-oriented monsters are similar to what you've just said about throwing in surprises, and I'll give an example of an action-oriented monster that I've used. So this was whilst I was DMing Descent into Avernus. I wanted to put this little oasis there, and this oasis was basically a place where demons and monsters and devils and whatnot couldn't get to unless they were good aligned, but this was unbeknownst to the players. And within this oasis there was a sleeping gold dragon, and because of that, if you know their lair actions, like the whole place is covered in this like pearlescent mist, and it's really like cool and soothing and enchanting. And in order for the dragon to maintain this oasis, he has to stay in this deep slumber, like the Odin sleep. And somehow the players just got lost and ended up there. But of course, this dragon is asleep, so the dragon needs somebody to defend him. So I actually pulled some monsters from the Undying. So I pulled the Undying from Eberron and wanted to use, because I read the book and I thought, these guys look kind of cool. I want to use these guys. So the Undying are like these undead guards, basically, and they are good aligned. So I figured they'd be fantastic guards for this sleeping gold dragon. And essentially the way to get into this oasis was across a bridge, and they would guard the bridge. So on the bridge itself, I had a few Undying, and just looking at their stat block, they don't really have many hit points.
No, they're
challenge rating 2. 26 hit points, challenge rating 2, and I think the players at that time were maybe level 10, 11 or something like that, so they could easily kill them in one hit. So on the bridge there were these 4 Undying against 5 level 10 characters. However, at the in the tower, I put an Undying Counselor there, who was basically their boss, and I gave him an extra ability whereby if any of these Undying went down, he could use a reaction to reanimate them. which was an amazing encounter, because obviously the players are in hell. They don't trust a single fucking thing in this place.
No.
So they start going over the bridge. The Undying start heading towards them. Combat breaks out. They kill a couple of the Undying, and that's when I decide, you know what, I'm going to trigger this action. So the Undying Counselor uses his action to make the to make the soldiers on the bridge instantly stand back up. And it was great because the players were like, fuck, what do we do? Oh god, how do we kill these things?
Yeah.
And because of that, that's just one example of what you can do with action orientated creatures. You go and watch the Matt Colville video, but his example is really good as well. Like, I think he uses an example of bandits or goblins or something like that. So you have some regular bandits just using the regular stat block, but one of them will be the boss. And that boss will be able to, command his underlings to, he'll use the reaction to command his underlings to, or one of his underlings to get an extra attack or to move out of the way or something like that. And it just adds an extra element to combat. It's not quite a legendary action. It's not as powerful as that, but it's it adds that extra layer that you're looking for in combat, rather than just going through the motions of attack, now it's your turn, attack, now it's your turn. So yeah, action oriented monsters, go check out the video. Really good tool, one of my favorites. How about you? One from you, Addison.
I have a thing where anything you can do, the monsters can do. So anything you can do, the monsters can do, and like I said just before, sometimes better. So one of my favorite rules is flanking. We've talked about it, like, as a martial artist and somebody who knows fighting, I know that it's hard to fight off 2 opponents at once. So if I allow my players to do that, I let my monsters do that as well. And the monsters sometimes, like, because there's more of them, get more flanking opportunities, and to move out of those flanking positions will mean taking attacks, and will mean, so I think that having a level playing field in terms of what monsters can do, and what, well, not just monsters but enemies can do, because not all enemies are monsters, is really important, because some people forget, like, they're like, well, enemies wouldn't duck for cover, and you're like, well, why wouldn't they? Like, you know what I mean? Like, when you've played games with some DMs, they're like, they also refuse to let their monsters run away, and it's like, well, if I can do that, then they can do that as well. And you know what, they might. If you want to create an engaging monster, nothing. It's very unlikely you're going to come across a monster that wants to fight to the death. Very unlikely. Yeah. And if it does want to fight to the death, in most instances, something's in its favour. Like, if it is confident enough to fight you to the death, then it knows something you do not. Yeah. Which is usually they've got a surprise. There's something about the terrain that they know, so they might have dug a pit, and you stand something. Yeah, or like. They know that. So, for example, your Undying example, the Undying are not afraid to go and fight because they know they can get reanimated by the dude in the tower. So like, I think that it's important. That's a massive tool for me, having that idea of, like, anything the players can do, the enemies can do too. So yeah, back to you then. I return. Definitely flanking. And I've played with a DM before who allowed the players to crit, but the monsters never crit, and I hate that. I think if the monster crits,
The monster has earned that crit as well.
Oh yeah. What? Why? Like, why would you do that? That makes no sense.
I don't know.
Like,
maybe they thought it. Maybe they thought they wanted to go easy, but I think, you know, if the players can crit, then the monsters can crit. And then there's I used to use crit tables back in the day, which I know are very controversial things, and that's why I stopped using them, because I couldn't be bothered with the argument anymore. But you know, if the players are using crit tables, then the monsters get to use the crit tables as well. If the monster crits, you know, instead of rolling double dice, maybe it can knock your sword out of your hand or something like that instead. But yeah, those things definitely have to work both ways.
Yeah. So give me. We'll take, let's say, 3 tools that we both have. So your second tool. What's your second biggest tool that you reach for when you're creating a combat encounter?
I'm not sure if this is a tool. I'm not sure if this is the answer that you're looking for. But one of the things I would suggest people do is, and I think some people can, you know, get carried away looking at a stat block. Don't just look at the stat block. Read about the monster. Okay?
No, that's a tool, like the lore and the descriptions and stuff. Like knowing the monsters really well, monster knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah, don't just throw in a monster for the sake of having a combat encounter. And I would say, especially if you're on the road, and especially if you're doing a random encounter table. And I'll probably use the random encounter tables for my third tool. But whilst we're on the subject of reading your monster, like I'm just flicking through some monsters now, and let's choose one at random. Tell me when to stop.
Stop.
All right. What the heck is that? Bapedo? I don't know what Bapedo is. Let's choose another one. Tell me when to stop again.
Stop.
Okay, we've got we've stopped on Conclave Dryad. So we all know what a Dryad is. It's essentially a fey creature, essentially a fey elf, basically, protector of the forests, yada yada yada. Now, a fey creature, for example, they're lawful good. So, you know, if your party's good, it's going to be unlikely that you're going to be fighting a Dryad. But, you know, if you are choosing a monster at random, what would it take for a good aligned Dryad to want to fight a good aligned party? You know, maybe you stumbled into an area that you shouldn't have. Okay, what are that creature's motives for wanting to fight you? And it doesn't need to be a good aligned creature. You know, it could be a beast or something. It could be, you know, something simple like a bear. Why does that bear want to fight you? Are there some creatures nearby? And then once you've decided why they're having that fight, you know, have a look at the terrain. Where are you fighting it? Because you're not going to fight a bear in the middle of a city. You're going to fight a bear in the forest. You're not going to fight a Dryad in the middle of the city. You're going to fight a Dryad in a forest as well.
And you're most likely to fight those, especially those two things, on their home turf, aren't you? Like,
so they're going to have the advantage.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like having knowledge is definitely a tool that's usable, because like you look at. So if we take my Death Knight example, you know that Death Knights are usually quite honourable people who've been corrupted in some way, either through necromancy. Lots of people forget that actually Death Knights don't have to be revived. Sometimes people just become Death Knights because of what's happened to them in the past. Lord Sloth is an example that's given in the monster manual of like a cursed person, because he's trying to repent for his sins. So he's like he's undead, and he's got to keep going round and doing things to try and like find rest. In my case, I used, obviously it was a very powerful warrior that was raised by a necromancer to fight, but he was still honourable, and he actually fought, because they somewhat retain personalities, he fought in a way that I made that NPC fight. He had dogs. So like knowing your monsters allows you to also customize them and allows you to like bolt things onto them. So yeah, that's a really good point. I really like that. And plus, because
sorry, go on.
Plus I'm nerdy, so I like that kind of thing.
if we go back to my Dryad example, you know, I'm looking at the information here. It says Dryads work with other sylvan creatures to defend their forest. So, you know, maybe you're not just fighting a Dryad, maybe throwing a couple of sprites in there, which are incredibly low-level monsters, but you know,
annoying,
they're really good. Annoying, and they're really going to mess with the action economy if you have to not just fight a Dryad, but fight a couple of sprites as well. Also says unicorns, treants, satyrs live alongside them. So you know, if you're looking for some mobs to throw in alongside your
boss monster,
your main boss monster, then you know, read the stat block. That's got all the stuff that you need in there to make an encounter that's relevant to the area that you're in, the world that you're in, the terrain that you're in.
Yeah, I think for my second tool, and it kind of goes with your knowledge as well, is customization. If you want a boss monster and to use a base boss monster, so say you want to use that Dryad, like, change it a little bit. If you want it to be like threatening, don't be afraid to go, all right, so I'm going to increase the DC of the allure trait that it has, the one that charms everyone. That's what the Dryads can do, that, can't they? They can do the whole charming thing.
Charm.
Yeah,
charm, yeah.
Fey charm. I'm going to raise the AC of. I'm going to raise the DC of that, or even, you could go, right, I'll tell you what. If I raise the DC of Fey Charm, and then I say give this creature the ability to command anyone who's under its Fey Charm to do something, like that's just it's a small edit, like, and yeah, it's going to take, and it's balanced out in the fact that it's going to take 2 actions, like. It's not like, oh, you fall under Fey Charm, now you just do whatever I say. It's like, 1 action, Fey Charm everybody, see who gets thing, and then second action, okay, all of you guys who are in love with me at the minute, go to sleep. And then poof, 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 poof. And then you'll have on average, you'll have 2 or 3 people still up, and they'll be like, and then there's now this extra thing that you've got to worry about, in the fact that if this thing can succeed in charming you, it can make you do things, like it might even say run, and like you now spend all your actions running, like, for away from it. So I think my second tool is definitely edit monsters you want to be threats and memorable, because then your players will go, do you remember that time when we come up against this thing and we thought it was just a regular Dryad. We thought it was just a regular Dryad. We thought we could take it, and then suddenly it was telling us to like attack each other, and we did, because of the fact that we'd all fallen for its charms. Like, we like kind of almost like a poison ivy, like for those of you who know DC Comics, almost like a poison ivy like effect in terms of vision and mechanics. So yeah, customize. Don't be afraid to change. But my caveat to that is, don't be that guy who changes everything or changes things because you want to in the middle of a fight. That's not fair. Like, my Death Knight was always going to have the ability to change his weapon, like, because I realized that there was a serious flaw in the Death Knight in the fact that I don't think it has any ranged weapons, which ranged weapons are rubbish compared to its sword. So I was like, right, we're gonna change that. Change 1 or 2 things and then leave it. Don't go mad and make this Franken monster that's impossible to beat just because you think it's fun. Like, there has to be challenge, not impossibility, if that makes sense.
I'm just looking at the stat block for the Dryad now. The Dryad, its weapon is club. Okay, fine. Okay, that's fine. But it also has an ability called Tree Stride, which basically allows it to teleport from tree to tree. You swap that club for a bow, and then use its Tree Stride ability. Oh, you could have some fun. You could have some fun with that. One of
the DMs that I played with once, he did give a Dryad a bow, and he did keep the Tree Stride ability, but it also applied to its attacks. So it could fire an arrow into a tree and make that arrow come out of a tree that was behind you.
That's badass.
Yeah, like so basically, I think he took it from there's a bad guy in Naruto called Haku, and they have this ability where they make like ice mirrors, and they can like teleport between the mirrors, and like they can throw attacks from all the mirrors as well, or throw attacks through one mirror and it comes out another. So I think that was his because we were literally in like a circle of trees, it was like a grove. And there was like a rock in the middle. I remember it quite vividly, and it was just like, right, fuck it, bang, like arrow in that tree. Where'd the arrow go? And it hit me in between the shoulder blades, and I was like, what? Like, and we suddenly realised, oh no, like, and that would obviously give it things like advantage and stuff like that. So you get like that idea of, oh, I'm in this thing's home, like this is not good. I need to take this away. And one of the ways you took that away was, if we can get close to it, we can grapple it and stop it from going into trees, sort of thing. Which again increases the risk because we've got to get close to it. Like there's little things. So Leon, tool number 3 for yourself. What's your third tool that you go to? You've got your spanner, you've got your wrench. What's your drill?
My third one, I need a reason for there to be combat. I'm not the biggest. Okay, I don't mind random encounter tables. However, I do not like random combat tables. And let me explain the difference. So a random encounter table will have 1 to 20 you roll, and then it will give you or you've written out an actual encounter. So I don't know, you're walking through the forest and you stumble across a child, and the child says they need help, yada yada yada. It turns out that the child is a changeling and wants to kill you and rob you. What I don't like, and I have really bad experience with a DM that's done this, is they didn't have a random encounter table. They had a random combat table, which was literally a 1 to 20 list of monsters that they might fight out on the road. So you're walking down the road and you're in the forest, and a centaur appears and he attacks you. Roll combat, roll initiative. I don't like that. I need there to be a reason for combat, and I think that's one of the keys to making it engaging. If you're just walking down the road and a wolf appears, it's just okay. Can we just like do a skills challenge and move on? Why do I need to kill this wolf? Other than the fact that it wants to kill me, I really do need there to be a reason for the fight, rather than just for the sake of fighting.
No, that's a good tool, like having a reason, because that means that you know your players, doesn't it? It knows you know your players and you know their characters enough.
And I think once you get to a certain level, I don't know, anything over 5, encountering a band of bandits on the road is just pointless, isn't it? You might as well just make that a skills challenge, or you might as well just not even bother with that combat itself. So yeah, when you get to higher levels, you really need to start thinking about random encounters, because as the challenge rating goes up, the monster's going to be less common in the world. So yeah, you really need to make a reason for it to be wanting to kill you.
Yeah, monsters are intelligent. Most monsters are intelligent. Like beasts, obviously not so much, but especially people. So if a bandit hits you with, say, a shot because they don't recognize you from afar, and then say you're 5th level, so you're pretty established by this point. People are beginning to hear about you and know who you are. If they saw that it was you, they'd go, shit, run. Like, I'm good. I don't want this fight. Like, you can, okay, here's our take for today. We're going to leave this here. You let us go with our lives. Job's a good one, sort of thing. Like, it's not about, I like that. So yours were action-orientated monsters, knowing your monsters and creatures and whatnot, and then giving those creatures reasons. So yours are a lot less mechanical than mine. I've noticed yours are like yours are almost like theory, like, right?
I mean, the mechanics are the mechanics. It's 5e.
Yeah, I whereas mine have been like, anything you can do, the monsters can do, customized mechanically. Because my third one is still kind of like a mechanic, and it is like tactics. Like, so like, for for example, if you're on a road, like a big open road and a big open space where you're going to get ambushed, like, how are they going to do that? Well, they've obviously dug trenches and they're going to pop out and they're going to be like below you a little bit in these like weird like trenches. You're going to come across what looks like piles of dead bodies, like they used to do in Vietnam and during Second World War with Japan, where they used to pretend they were all dead, and then one of them just gets up. And they're also going to take you by surprise. Like, if you're someone who thinks that you're not going to win an encounter against these people, you're going to put everything you can to your advantage. Therefore, they're going to take you by surprise. Like, nobody comes out. Like, no lion comes out of its den and just goes, "Rah! I will fight you." Most of the time, they wait for you to get a bit too close to the den and then jump out at you, sort of thing. The Displacer Beast one's a great example. You said, like, if you're hunting Displacer Beast, those things hunt in threes. So if you can see one, probably two more. And if you don't know that, shame, sucks to be you, because they're coming, sort of thing. Like, so I think tactics is my last tool. Like, you grab. I think the best time I've ever used it is I made some bandits who use guns, and so one of the tactics they had was like all of them had short range guns. So they had like shotguns, like for when they got close to them, and they'd like stick them under the person's chin and fire, because they're like, yeah, this isn't effective, but it's not a ranged weapon anymore. Like, they have an ability to make it so that it's a short range weapon because it's a cone now instead of an attack roll. So tactics are important. Having people geared up to accomplish those tactics is really good.
One of my philosophies, and I think people should also use this if they want to make their combat more engaging, is if it's got to the point where initiative's been rolled, don't hold back. That said, if you're not going to hold back, then make sure that there is a way for your players to escape.
Oh yeah.
Because then if there's a way for your players to escape, it's clear, it's obvious. Or even if it's not clear, it's obviously if it's something that can be identified with a little bit of thought, a little bit of ingenuity, it's out of your hands if it's TPK at that point.
Yeah, again, anything, if the monsters can run away, then your players can run away.
So can the players. That's exactly it.
That thing is two-way. Anything the players can do, the monsters can do. So by proxy, anything the monsters can do, the players can do.
Yeah.
So,
I may pull my punches a little bit if I put them in a situation where there's no escape. But if there's a way to escape, if there is a way to escape, if there's a way to get out of that combat, whether it's through running away, whether it's through stopping and talking, if there's a way to stop, then it's out of my hands. I'm not pulling any punches.
Fair enough. That's a good point. Like, what do you think about people who purposely? So you talked about the crit DM who didn't allow monsters to crit, which is by far the most bizarre thing I've ever heard. I'm sorry. What do you think about DMs who on purposely like make it so that their players always come out on top with like no scars? Like, it always looked like it wasn't easy, but it didn't look particularly hard either. What do you think about that?
See, my thing is, and I know, there's a lot of people out there, the Critical Role fans probably not going to agree with this. My thing is, ultimately, D&D is a game. If you take away the element of failure, at that point it's no longer a game, it's just shared storytelling. And I think that's absolutely fine if that's what you're down for. If that's what you want to do, I don't have a problem with that. Personally, I still consider D&D to be a game first and foremost, and a storytelling mechanism secondary. But that's just me. I absolutely understand if people want to do it a different way. So,
yeah. I don't think Critical Role fans think that failure is not an option. There are some.
How many? Whoa! How many deaths were there in season 1?
There was a lot, actually.
How many player deaths were there in season 1?
The thing is,
Zero. There was 0.
Pike died.
Okay, there was 1.
Pike died. Percy died 3 times. Because Matt has the revive rule that makes it harder every time you get revived. So a lot of them actually died quite a lot, because they were stupid or did silly things. But yeah, I get your point. They're not in series 1. Nobody had to make a new character completely, because by the time those deaths were coming up, it was at a time when they had the means to negate them. Whereas in campaign 2, because of people being away and not being able to do the game, they lost an ability to revive people, which is why Molly died, because of his own silliness as well, because he forgot that he was a blood hunter and everything. He does take HP, but yeah, I Molly's death still cuts me up a little bit. So moving on. I think this would be a good time actually to maybe tell a story or two. Each of us will tell a story about a good bit of combat we had. One of mine's quite recent, so if you want, I can go first on that and explain why I thought that was exciting. So on Sunday, I run a Wild Mount game, and my players are in the Menagerie Coast, and they have been investigating a series of grave robbings of the Solezzo, which is like the city guard. And it's only Solezzo members being targeted for this grave robbing. And basically, what the necromancer's been doing has been putting these like husks with these helmets on that disguise them back into service, so that they give him information. My wife's playing and she's in the room, but what she knows won't hurt her really, because he can see everything that they see. He can experience everything they experience. So everything those husks have heard, everything they've seen, he has also seen, and he knows. So it's like a network. And they found out about this, and they found a few individuals who they believe to be these husks, and basically they went to the graveyard, and they actually found out that a lot of the husks were at the graveyard, and the combat actually kicked off because people started asking questions and saying that, we think that the Solezzo's been infiltrated. So all those zombies like killed all the living people who were still there, and then combat kicked off. They found 2 hidden enemies. They found the Death Knight, who had 2 death dogs with him, and it was a massive combat. This massive, like almost like showdown of wills between this necromancer and the party, and it was really cool because, again, like I said, the Death Knight had this ability to change his weapon, and he compelled Jewel the fighter to keep the fighter trained on him, so that all his like minions could take on the like spellcasters and stuff and keep them out of like being able to like cast big spells at him. And even though they got rid of the mobs pretty well, what they did quite well is they brought a cleric NPC with them who saw that a lot of them were going down after a conjured volley from the one of the zombies who happened to be a ranger. And we had this moment where we're like, oh my god, everyone is down apart from a couple of people. So, and this guy was still up. So what he did is he divine interventioned. He used his action to divine intervention, rolled a 001 on the percentile, and his thing was just, I need to get these people up. So it allowed him to cast the 9th level spell Mass Heal on everyone. And he did. And he had 700 hit points. Everybody got up. Everybody was alive. Nobody, and then they started like taking on the people, got rid of them, and I think that was quite an exciting encounter because of the fact that it kind of wasn't inevitable, but like the build-up seemed to be going that way, and like the zombies used tactics, like they got rid of all the guards who were normal beforehand so that you didn't have more allies. They took multiple attacks. They did everything they could in order to put the party at disadvantage, and then it was up to these more versatile monsters such as the zombie ranger, the rogue who wasn't a zombie, but there's story reasons for that. He was basically keeping the ranger alive because the ranger was his brother. They were like linked because I gave them like a cool thing where if the rogue and the ranger were too far apart, the ranger stopped moving, almost like a life link.
There's a spell that does that, isn't there? Something similar.
So one of my guys is a warlock and he has pushing blast. So he literally, after this ranger did that volley, pushed him too far out of range, so he was just stunned turn after turn. Like it pretty much ended him. The rogue didn't stand a chance once his support was done. And yeah, it was just there was lots of cool little things that went right and wrong in that fight that gave it that deadliness, that gave it that threat, and then they overcame it, and it was like a big deal, like that they overcame it. And I don't think that they're going to walk away from that without some sort of not baggage, but you know what I mean, like they've learned a lesson that like if it wasn't for that cleric being there at that moment, they weren't going to make it out of there. So then that makes this necromancer even more threatening. It makes them even more of a worry, and now they're even more desperate to find them, if that makes sense. So it really fed into the story as well. What about you, Leon? What was your
thinking about this? And I have ran so much combat, it's difficult to pick highlights because my memory is terrible. But one that I am particularly drawn to as one of my favorite pieces of combat ever was in Curse of Strahd. And it's going to sound really mundane. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to capture how white knuckle it is, and I'm going to have to try and avoid spoilers. Jesus, man. So we're in Castle Barovia, okay, and the players are going up this tower. It's basically, you know, one of those old style hollow towers with a staircase going up around the edge. If you fall off the edge, you're going to fall all the way back down the tower. So they're going up this spiral staircase and trying to get right up to the top. They start ascending the spiral staircase, and the tower begins shaking crazily. Can't tell you why because spoilers. And the only way to not fall down is to crawl on your stomach, basically go prone and start crawling that way. For this entire combat, not a single one of the players thinks of that as an option to do. So the first 5-6 rounds of combat, they were basically moving 30 feet. Excuse me. So for the first 5-6 rounds of combat, they were essentially moving 30 feet, falling back down 30 feet, and so on and so forth. Then eventually, I sicked the vampire spawn on them to start chasing them.
Oh dear.
They did manage to get partway up the tower through succeeding on the deck saves to not fall down, which was interesting. But the vampire spawn knew that the way to get up the tower was to go prone and crawl. And even though they saw the vampire spawn doing this, the players did not at one point at all think that, hey, maybe we should do that. So because the players keep failing their deck saves to stay on their feet, they keep falling down, the vampire spawn very, very, very quickly catch up. And they get to this point up in the tower where there's a bunch of halberds on the walls.
Mm-hmm.
These are animated halberds.
Oh god.
All right, so now they're literally between a rock and a hard place. They've got these vampire spawns about to meet them, okay, and all of these halberds have just started flying off the walls and started taking swipes at them.
Yeah.
So they're pretty fucked, basically. So the players decide to get really ingenious, and I'm super proud of this. It's one of my favorite moments in D&D. We had a druid in the party who threw down a wall of thorns across the entire width of this hollow tower, just above where the vampire spawn were. I think one of them was just beyond where they put the wall of thorns. So there were, let's say, 3 below the wall of thorns and 1 just above. So the druid threw down this wall of thorns, blocking a couple of the vampires, and then the sorcerer in the party fireballed the wall of thorns. So now the vampires can't get past it at all. And the paladin, who was last because he kept failing his dex saves, obviously because paladins are low dex, is now in combat with the vampire spawn that's beyond the that's above the thorn wall, and the paladin succeeds on his attack on his strength check, picks up this vampire spawn and throws him down directly into the wall of thorns. It was amazing. One of my best pieces of combat ever. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
That is a cool, like, ingenious thing, and I think that combat does allow for those ingenious moments. Like, one of the things that happened during that zombie encounter I was talking about was my wife actually said to the knowing cleric abilities, went, "Have you got anything that that can, like, get rid of the undead?" And he's like, he's the same level as them, so he's like, "Yeah. There is something I can do." And if he'd have stood in the middle of this graveyard and just done it, if he'd have done turn undead, he would have killed most of them. But the other players talked him out of it. They were like, no, don't do that, because then we might end up fighting everything. And I was like, "Oh, Jenny, like, you are, like, so clever." Like, that was really clever. But then because the others got involved, they kind of, like, gave me an out and helped me out. So yeah, it is interesting how I think especially combat brings out one of the more creative sides of players. Do you think that, or do you think that's not right?
No, I absolutely do, and I always reward creativity like that. Even if it means breaking the mechanics. If somebody, a wall of thorns inside a stone tower, if somebody wants to do that and put it across the entire gap, you know what? You've thought of something cool. You've thought of a cool way to use your spell. You should be rewarded for that. So you know what? Rule of cool. Fuck it. Let's accept it.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right on that one.
I think that's one of the things we can put in our toolbox. If your players think of something creative, you should always reward it.
Oh yeah, that's a good point, actually. I can't believe we missed that out. Good shout. If you have players who do something that makes you go, shit, I've never thought of that. Like, that's not you being dumb. Because I think a lot of DMs get embarrassed by that when they get caught unawares. I love it when I get caught unawares. Me too. Like, yeah, I curse it every now and then, but I'm like, you know what? No, like, if I brought my A game, they brought their A game, they've won, and I am a bad loser as a player, but as a DM, I don't really mind. I like it. So yeah, we've talked about what a combat encounter is, what makes a good combat encounter. We've talked about our combat encounter toolbox. We've talked about some good examples of combat we've had recently. I think that about wraps it up. Anything else?
There's a lot. I think there's still so much to talk about with combat that we could do another episode on combat down the line. There's just so much to unpack in an hour and a half podcast.
Yeah, I know.
Definitely come back to this.
We'll do like a second one, or we'll maybe pick a more, let's say,
more focused area
instead of just combat. We'll talk about like fighting with this type of monster or something like that, because I think that would help us. Because what we're doing is a lot of like theory crafting and a lot of like, and to the layman, and this isn't me being like stuck up or anything, that's hard. And for first time DMs, that theory crafting and that like mechanical like puzzle is difficult, and it takes a while to get used to. So we don't want to overload people with that. I guess.
Let's definitely revisit this at some point.
Yeah. All right then. So let's start making our way out of this hole of the combat spiral, and let's go to our favorite end segment, the deck of many questions. The deck of many questions is our segment where we take user submitted questions, user generated questions given to us via YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, I suppose now over all these other podcasting platforms now. Leon, can you leave comments on Spotify?
I actually don't know.
We'll have to figure that out. But basically, if you can get in contact with us in any way, you can stack the deck against us or in our favour, and we will answer a question every podcast. And then if we have guests, they will also take one from our deck. So, Leon, we've actually had a question added, so there is now 42 questions.
I have already rolled question 12.
Question 12. Do you want to take this one? Do you want to start? Question 12?
Let's see. Odd for you, even for me. That's a 6. So yes, I will take it.
Question 12 is one time you took full advantage of the GM script. Have you answered that before?
I have indeed. Yes.
Roll again.
Roll again. So that's question 40.
40. What was your least favourite character that you've DM'd for? What was your least favourite character that you've DM'd for?
Oh, good question.
That is spicy. Go on then, Leon.
It is spicy.
Eat the jalapeno.
Okay, there was this. I for the life of me, I cannot remember his name. He was an Israeli chap, and he played in one of my online groups. And I don't know, for whatever reason, he really didn't like me, and he ended up leaving my campaign in the penultimate session because he didn't like me for whatever reason. But he made the most annoying fucking character I've ever DM'd for. It was a turtle. The turtle's name was Shelby, and he made this character that was so inquisitive. He would say, "But why?" to every single fucking thing he was told. But why? And it was so annoying. It was so fucking frustrating. All of the NPCs that he encountered, I had to just, show my frustration through those NPCs because it was so fucking frustrating. And I did tell him to stop it, and he was like, "Yeah, but I'm just role-playing my character." Yeah, but it's so fucking annoying. There's a line to be drawn.
Yeah, I hate that when somebody goes, "But it's what my character would do." Sometimes that's great. We talked about this I think in the episode with Sean, or something, where we said that's what my character could do is either the best or the worst thing you can hear, isn't it? Like, do you think?
Yeah, I agree. Some people are going to play it really well. Some people are going to realize that it's a game. Some people understand character development. Some people don't. Some people like to take those quirks and just, not adapt them at all to the situation that they're in. If a fucking beholder is breathing down your face, he's 2 inches away from your face, and you just say to him, "But why?" then you should fully expect to be killed.
Disintegrated raid, yeah.
Disintegrated
raid. Fair enough.
Fuck that character and fuck that guy.
Fair enough.
That was a bit harsh. But I almost quit DMing because of that guy, because he massively knocked my confidence. So, fuck him.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like, you do this out of the goodness of your heart. It's not like you were charging him or anything.
Yeah, and the thing is, he stayed for the entire campaign. The next session was going to be the finale, the final boss battle. It was Dragon Heist, and he messaged me and said, "I'm gonna leave. I don't like your DM style." I was like, "Okay, did I do something wrong? Can I fix it?" "No, not really. I just don't like. We've been playing for the past 4 months. What the fuck?" Yeah. I almost gave up DMing because of that guy, and I'm really glad I didn't, and I'm glad everybody else in the party was cool.
Fair enough. Roll for me then, Leon.
All right, let's give you a numdiddlyumber. We have 38.
Have you ever fudged a dice roll? If so, what was your most impactful time doing it? I don't really fudge dice rolls. I will admit, most of the time, I don't fudge dice rolls. However, I have forgotten that Disintegrate does a base 44 points of damage before. And I say forgot in, let's say, inverted commas.
Yeah, you totally forgot.
Yeah. Because it was epic big bad evil guy finale. They were fucking fighting their hearts out, and I was just like, no, Disintegrate does 44 damage on hit, like minimum. So I just went, you know what? We're just gonna roll dice, because most of the time rolling dice would kill most of them. So I'm like, you know what? If I get above average, I'm probably gonna kill them anyway. So let's not take the piss. Yeah. So I forgot that Disintegrate did 44 damage. Because I like the spell Disintegrate and everything, but I do think that it only takes 2 good Disintegrates and a combat is ruined. Like, it's then not fun. So I didn't fudge a dice roll, but I will say, and I will be honest and say that I did not forget that Disintegrate does damage plus 44. I just decided to not, because I didn't want to kill everyone outright, because also as well the big bad evil guy was a sorcerer and was twin spelling it, so it was like, yeah, no like, because I would have ended it, really. Like, I could have ended that encounter in 2 turns.
Yeah.
So it just wasn't fair. And the thing was, like, her rolls were basically like almost killing them outright anyway, because as soon as you drop to 0 hit points from Disintegrate anyway, done, aren't you? Done out. I know, like, body is gone. So I didn't need the 44 damage, just seemed excessive. So yeah, that's my one. I'm sorry. I know that some people are gonna be like, well, you told us you forgot. I'm like, I didn't. I'm sorry. I just didn't want to kill you in that way. I didn't want you to go out that way. I wanted you to go out fighting, like. And you won. Like, come on, you won, even though, like, you were up, and some of you were like up and down. So I think that was okay. Like,
I don't have a problem with that. I think that's fine. I think that's a perfectly fine thing to do.
But yeah, that's been the deck of many questions. That's both me and Leon answering. If you want to stack the deck in our favor or against us, submit your questions to us via comments, DMs, Facebook posts, any way you can get a hold of us. We will add them to the deck, we'll roll for them, and hopefully we'll shout you out, because those 2 questions were from, so 38 was from Alex Boston, and your one I think was I think that was from Alex Boston as well. I think both files were submitted by Alex Boston. So
okay.
Yeah, because yours was 40 and mine was 38. So yeah, both were submitted by Alex Boston. So thanks, Alex, for taking the time to ask us.
Thank you.
Anyway, that's been us, the pod of many things. This has been our 7th episode, fighting the good fights. talking about combat encounters, how to create them, what tools you need.
Halfway through season 1, boy.
We're halfway through season 1 of our podcast, and we're very grateful to everyone who has been listening, subscribing. We hope that you follow us to Anchor and Spotify and all that good stuff. Leon, let the people all know where they can find us.
Instagram, The Pod O Many Things. Facebook, at The Pod O Many Things. You can find us on anchor.fm/The Pod of Many Things, along with our distribution list of where you can find our podcast hosted. And finally, we are on Twitter at Pod O Many Things, all one word.
Thank you very much, Leon. Well, I've been your friendly favourite Furbolg or wizard, Adderson. Leon has been our co-host and half-orc bard and artificer. We hope you have a lovely evening, day, afternoon, whatever time it is, and we'll see you soon. Good night.
This is the part where I fade out the music. Ciao, ciao.